Hi, David. Do I have your permission to record?
Yes,
Perfect. David, can you say your first and last name and spell both of them?
yes. David Windley. That's David. Windley is Windley.
Great. And David, could you say and spell the name of your organization?
Yes, the organization is IQ Talent Partners LLC. So IQ Talent is all one word. IQTALENT. Then Partners Partners, and we are an LLC.
Great. Is IQ and the T in talent all capitalized?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. Well, first and foremost, why don't you tell me what you do for IQ Talent?
So I'm the president of IQ Talent Partners. We are a professional services firm in the talent acquisition space. We have over 50 active clients at any given time, spread throughout technology industry, retail, media, entertainment, social media, automotive, industrial, and healthcare.
Whoa, a lot of different industries. Where are you based?
Yes. We are based in the Silicon Valley and Nashville.
Cool. Oh my God, I love that. All right. So, I've been asking people if they have any statistics on companies that have hired mediocre and bad employees. But what I'm really looking for, if you don't have specific statistics, is what a bad hire can cost a company in the long run. So, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, the statistics are hard to find on that because it's very qualitative. And so I don't know of any sources that have really good statistics on, the cost of bad hires, right, from a pure data perspective. Um, but what I can tell you, maybe a little bit of my background beyond IQ Talent Partners, is I've been 30 years as a leader of HR, mainly at technology companies, including Yahoo, Microsoft, Intuit, Silicon Graphics, Fusion.io, Activision. So that's my background, 30 years of HR leadership. So very familiar with this topic. So the cost of a bad hire, clearly there's the cost of the turnover, the additional turnover that I think in some companies you can quantify. But probably more important is the productivity loss that happens to the teammates, right, to the immediate team members, to the org in general. That's harder to quantify, but we all know that exists. And those of us that have operated in organizations see the results of it. Once you remove a bad hire and replace them with a good hire, you see the immediate change. So it's very significant. Another factor that I think people don't really account for, and it's again hard to quantify, is the cultural effects, right? So if you have a few bad employees, the effect that has on your overall culture, which can last beyond their tenure there. So depending on what the actual behaviors are and so forth. So that's another big factor to consider.
Those are all really good answers. So, when I think about a mediocre or a poor performer who's been hired, I have some ways that I would describe them. But what does mediocre and poor performance look like for you?
Well, actually, let me talk about both of them as separate. I think a poor performer is actually easier to identify. And really, the bigger problem in many companies is this mediocre or marginal is what we used to use when I was in corporate, right? Marginal performers, right? They're just right there on the line, potentially maybe meeting expectations or barely meeting, not quite meeting. Those are the tougher ones. So the poor performers, are easier to identify. These are people that just are not meeting objectives. They're just not, and oftentimes you're just not showing up, right? You're not putting in the effort. It can be seen in the results and the output of their work. And poor performers are more easily identified. That's from the work output. There's also poor performers in their behavior. And this is the part that, like I said, can affect culture, can affect the team more broadly, beyond just the work product of the individual. So these are people that don't follow through on commitments to other team members, so then they affect the other team members' productivity. These are people that may be obstructionists, inside of an organization where you need to work across functions and departments. So, just bad behavior. So poor performers, I think, are more easily identified. The marginal performer is the tough one, and that's someone that just kind of does enough to get by. At least that's their motive. They're not really just trying to perform the best of their ability. They're like, I just want to do enough work to try and survive, and they're not putting in extra effort. They're not giving you any discretionary output, and they may actually meet expectations, but they meet expectations because you have to stay on top of them. You have to have either supervisor or management attention to give them goals and specifically follow through, and then they do it. But even if they are kind of barely meeting expectations, they are a drain on the organization because you have to spend extra attention just to get them to meet. So I think those are even sometimes more cancerous to an organization than the obvious poor performers, because the poor performers you can really identify and deal with and get them out of the organization. These marginal performers are sometimes tougher.
Yeah,
but I would
makes
encourage
sense.
a high-performance organization to really spend a lot of time on that marginal performance. And so I guess the next question would be, well, how do we do that?
Uh-huh, that
One is
is
to
my
make
next
sure,
question. Yeah.
yeah, one is to make sure your standards of performance and what you consider performance includes these other factors that, desire to excel or other competencies or other capabilities besides just the work product, right? And that there are those other factors, being a good teammate, so forth and so on. The how you do things is part and parcel of evaluating someone's overall performance. So therefore, even if you have someone that kind of just gets the minimum work product done, but doesn't have the competencies or exude the characteristics that you really want in a good employee, that you've set the table that when this company thinks about performance, we think about the what and the how, and we are evaluating you on these other things. Are you a good teammate, or whatever those competencies, characteristics are in your company, and that will give you that platform, if you will, to then, in a proper evaluation, evaluate this person as not meeting the full expectations that we expect at XYZ company, and therefore you can act on that.
Sometimes I think the problem isn't that people are poor performers or stellar performers or even marginal performers. I think performance isn't defined. And
Yeah.
before you write a job description, companies really struggle to identify what good performance means. So can you take me through the thinking between, at the moment we decide we need a body at our office to do something and we write that job description, what should happen so that we get a baseline understanding of performance?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll go back to what I just said about when companies think about what good performance is to not only think about the traditional work product or job responsibility, right, requirements, but also culturally. What is a good employee look like at my company? And really taking the time to think about that as a company. And the really good companies, have a strong corporate culture, and they've really thought through breaking that down into either core competency characteristics, which can be translated into behaviors, right? So let's say teamwork. This
Right.
company really values people that are team-oriented. We'll break down that into behaviors that are something you can see and therefore you can act on versus, just being a good teammate, right?
Yeah.
What does good teamwork look like? It means communicating well with, your other teammates. It means if you can't make a commitment that you communicate to that person, whatever that might be, but you break it down into behaviors, right? So, and a lot of the good companies have gone through that effort. And once you have that as a company, that applies in performance management, but also applies on the front end when you're looking to hire people. And so a good job spec not only has, for this specific job that we're looking for, here's the work product outcomes that we're looking for, but also here are the characteristics of the people we want to hire into the company.
Yeah.
And then you can interview against those behaviors and characteristics and try and make sure you're bringing in people that will fit your culture and the performance characteristics you want your company.
Yeah, that's all really good, and I don't disagree with any of that. But here's my particular pain point with this article. So there are very sophisticated tools and mechanisms in place for large corporations to really think about competencies, do assessments of employees, match behavior and output up against job descriptions, and really use it almost like an algorithmic approach to evaluating performance. But my audience are entrepreneurs who maybe started up a dry cleaning chain in the 90s and now own 5 franchises, right? And they've got a manager in each dry cleaning store, and they've got a bunch of workers who are hourly, and they've got 65% turnover, and they're really struggling to figure out what's driving this continual turnover, and how do I hire better and coach better? And they don't have access to competency models. So
what I would say is the concepts are the same.
Yeah.
Just right size it for your organization. So let me just take the dry cleaner.
Yeah.
Or
please.
or the Jack in the Box or the local, right?
Yeah.
We've all been there. I worked there when I was in college, right?
Yeah.
But it's the same concept. So when you think about, in one of those environments, and yes, there's some basic skill sets you're going to need for someone to show up, be your cashier or what have you. But probably more important is reliability, trustworthiness, right? Follow through. And so that is a competency or characteristic. That's something that you should be interviewing for when you look at someone's background to see a pattern. So it's the same concept. It won't be the big 5 and all these tools and behaviors that you might have at Microsoft. But for my dry cleaner, what's probably more important is someone that is reliable than someone that has a skill set to do the cash register, because I can teach them that.
Yes, right.
So instead of looking for someone that has, you've been a cashier, maybe you're a cashier and you left and you every 6 months. What's more important to me is that reliability. So the concept, I think, applies all the way across. Hey, I'm a small business. I started president of this company 3 years ago. We had 5 employees. Now we're up to 80. We sat down and thought about what kind of company we want to build. What's the culture we want? So therefore, what types of people, what are the characteristics of the people we want? And we do use that when we interview people.
Yeah.
So it could be right-sized down to your organization. It's this concept of taking the time to really think about what does success really look like at your company, even if it's a 2 or 3 person company, right? And oftentimes the traditional way of looking at job specs and so forth is just the specific work product. And I would argue that most times it's these other characteristics that are more important.
So I agree, all of it, love it all. And I think one of the tricky things about writing this type of article is that people want some key takeaways like what's step one, what's step two, and I certainly am not going to write that. But do you have any quick
Well, I
starts
would
or
say,
quick
yeah,
wins
to that
for?
part, I would
Yeah,
say that take the time to think about that and discern that for your company.
and capture
And it could
it
be,
on it in
yeah,
a. Okay, all right, let's keep
yeah,
going. I
yeah.
don't mean to interrupt your train of thought.
Yeah, just like the dry cleaner example, you could pick one. You could pick any other example you want in your for your article. But yeah, I would actually maybe give them that, and then in the article give them an example of something that's more in line with your readership. So if you
Hmm.
want to use the dry cleaner example or whatever, but what really is important to success as an employee at your company. And in this case, a lot of these non-exempt jobs, it really is about
Oh, the
you know,
California Chamber of Commerce covers everything. So it's really, the example isn't
yeah,
important to me. I think what I'm really trying to
okay,
get you to say without saying it myself is like step one is getting your leadership to kind of come together and discern what your values are, right? And then
yes,
what's
exactly.
maybe two or three more steps to get people headed in the right direction? Any tips?
Yeah, so again, and we've mentioned it before, is the first thing is to really think about for
Yeah.
your company, what's the culture you want. Therefore, you and your leadership team being specific about it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Write it down, know what it is. You translate those characteristics into either competencies or specific behaviors, because the behaviors are what's actionable. That's what you can see
Love it.
people do at work. You cannot see values. You can see the behavior that the values may lead to. So that's an important step, is to take it down to that level. And then that can be used in performance management.
Yeah.
It can be used in hiring decisions, promotion decisions, and so forth.
Really good stuff. All right. So I have one kind of final question. Why do you think people settle and hire somebody when they're not 100% or even 80%? And what are the dangers of settling rather than waiting for someone who's a good fit?
Yes, so I think there's always a balance between execution and the business need to have someone doing the job and having the right person. So that's always the tension. And there are some managers that err too much on just getting a body in. Um, and I think depending on the type of job and the importance and impact that that job and that person will have on your organization, you really need to think about that balance. And the more that position role, person in the role is going to have an impact on the broader company,
Hmm.
the more you should wait. Because the cost of making a bad decision outweighs, right, that extra month or two of speed that you gained by hiring. Um, and there are some jobs that really, quite frankly, are okay to bring someone in, try them out, don't work out, you turn them over. It's not a huge impact. But I think that's kind of the equation people need to think about in this decision.
Smart.
And most of the, I would say, professional jobs and above fall into the category of it's better to wait and hire the right person than to hire a body to do the job.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but I think about this slog of hiring, this bottleneck that tends to happen, and sometimes there are no right candidates. And I mean, now I'm going off on a philosophical tangent, but I think,
Yeah,
if you're an American company and your talent pool is America and you can't find talent within America, is and it's not even like a citizen question, but it's just what
yes.
should you do? Should you rethink your expectations? Should you restructure your work? Or do you just leave this position open and vacant and look to global markets? I don't really know the right
Yeah.
answer. Do you
Oh,
have an
yeah.
opinion on
No,
that?
all of those things. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, that's where you come into the broader question of a broader talent strategy, right? So
Yeah.
that companies grapple with this all the time. And so all of those are options. Okay. So if you're finding a situation where it's hard to find the right talent, and we're in this market right now.
Yes.
We are a recruiting firm, and we help our clients. They may say, I need I'm trying to think of one we're doing right now. I need I'll just take a generic one.
Mm-hmm.
We need, DevOps. This is technical people, in Nashville, that have these language skills and this, that,
Python expert or whatever. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so we could go through and try and find how many, and there may be only like 100 people, all of Nashville that can do that. And so, part of, the situation is then maybe you have to reassess the job, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can either restructure it so that you have a better chance of finding people, or does the job have to be done in Nashville?
Right.
Can it be done somewhere else? Those are all legit questions, and all things that are part of a broader talent strategy for a company as they think through the skills and competencies they need for their company. Then you have to think about, how do I go map that with the reality of the market?
Yeah.
And, should I stay in the Bay Area and compete? Or should I go to Austin, where the cost of the talent's less, and the competition may be better, and I may be able to find people that work for my company versus competing against Google and Facebook here in the Bay Area, and I can't get the best people, right? So those are all legitimate things that people should think about as part of a broader talent strategy.
I know. It just drives me crazy when I hear from fellow HR colleagues and talent acquisition pros that, they've had X job open for 6 months and they can't find anybody. And it feels like a failure of the hiring process. And it also feels like a failure of critical thinking skills and imagination.
Exactly. And sometimes, if you use the analogy like a business manufacturer, a business process, oftentimes the talent acquisition part, the recruiter, the sourcer, is like the manufacturing plant part of the business equation, right?
Yeah.
So, someone gives you the spec to build a certain product and so forth, and manufacturing builds it, right?
Yeah, right.
And do they have the capacity to build it, right? That's like your recruiting team. Do you have enough capacity to go out and recruit, blah, blah, blah? Is there enough supply, right? So if you don't have the materials, you can't build it.
Yeah, you
right?
gotta have the raw materials, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's not a recruiting problem. It's a design problem.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, you're giving me a design that we just can't fill. Sometimes we call that the purple squirrel. They're giving me a spec that says, I want this super charismatic, good EQ communicator, and they need to be the best expert in making chip technology and circuit design. I'm telling you, okay, there's like 2 people in the world that are like that, right?
Exactly. I don't want him. I want him handsome.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So we shoot it back up and say there's a design problem. Maybe the charismatic fit is a separate job, and then this person is a separate job. Design it differently, then I can go fulfill it, right?
Yes.
So you're absolutely right.
But you need HR and talent people who have the courage and the influence to be able to say that.
Yes.
That's the other problem.
Absolutely. That's our job.
Yeah.
As HR professionals are not operators. They need to be business people.
Yeah.
And we just have expertise in talent and people, and contribute that to that business discussion. So this is a perfect example where this is strategic. This is not taking direction.
That's right.
And just executing, because maybe the design is wrong.
Yeah.
And you're going to fail. And you have to influence the business to say, maybe we shouldn't be having this organization in the Bay Area. Maybe it should be, over in Utah, in Salt Lake City, right? Yeah. Maybe it should be over here, and so forth. Those are strategic talent/business questions.
Yeah, fascinating. Man, I could do this all day. I am so grateful to have been connected with you, David. This is really interesting stuff, and your insights on the different steps to take and your focus on thinking about language, thinking about what's important to the company, super important, and also something unique that you brought to the table. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that.
No problem.
Yeah.
And, like I said, my background is 30 years of experience. I was a CHRO at Yahoo, Fusion IO,
God
had the
love
number
you.
2 job at Microsoft. So
I
if
don't
you
know
need
how you
help on other
survived.
topics,
I did
if
10
you need
years
help on
in
other
human
topics,
resources. That
let
was
me
enough for
know.
me. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And listen, I will be in touch in about 30 days with a copy of the article or somebody from California Chamber. And we will definitely make sure that you sign off on this before anything is printed under your name. Okay?
All right.
Oh,
Thanks, Lori. Good luck
yeah.
with this
Have a
one.
great weekend.
All right. You too.
Thanks. Bye bye.
All right. Bye.